The air crackled with a tension that could only be described as electric. I clutched a stack of flyers for my struggling bakery and felt a cold shiver run down my spine as I saw him. Charles, my ex-husband, the man who had left her with nothing but a mountain of debt and a broken heart, stood at the entrance of the community center, his arm possessively around me had never seen before. I am the one who radiated the kind of carefree confidence that I had lost years ago. Charles's eyes, cold and calculating, met me across the room and a smirk twisted his lips. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This was a calculated move, a cruel reminder of the power he still held over me. "Well, look at that, my dear ex-wife," he remarked with a snide tone as if finding amusement in our unexpected encounter. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I asked, "What brings you here?" "What's wrong with enjoying a night out in our charming little town with my future wife?" he replied, unnecessarily pulling his fiancée closer by her waist. Barbara, his fiancée, looked between us with a confused expression. "Do you know her?" she asked him hesitantly. Rolling his eyes, Charles answered, "Barbara, darling, remember the one I told you about, my ex-wife Jennifer?" He shot me a cold glare. "The one who tried to take everything I have in our divorce," he added with a hint of bitterness. Heat flooded my cheeks and I struggled to restrain myself from reacting to his smugness. "Do not twist the truth, Charles," I retorted, meeting his gaze squarely. "Wasn't it you who refused to pay a penny in alimony thanks to that prenuptial agreement you forced me to sign?" I continued, feeling anger simmering beneath the surface. His eyes flashed with anger. "You mean the prenup that protected me from your greedy intentions?" he countered, leaning in closer. "Enjoy your suffering, Jennifer, knowing you walked away with nothing." I narrowed my eyes at him, my nails digging into my palms. How could he make light of our marriage as if it meant nothing? "You accomplished this battle, Charles, but I'm not done fighting," I declared, my gaze shifting to Barbara with a sense of pity for her unknowing involvement. "You may have found a new plaything, but I won't let you harm my son the way you've hurt me," I added, my voice firm. He laughed dismissively. "Your son Kevin is as much mine as he is yours, and if anyone's to blame for his pain, it's you and your constant meddling." The tension crackled between us as we exchanged barbs, each word a reminder of the bitterness that lingered from our past. He lowered his voice, his words carrying a warning. "You should know what's best for you and stay out of my life, Jennifer. I have my ways now, and I won't let you ruin it." With that, he walked past me, Barbara trailing behind with a hint of concern as I watched them leave. Restlessness and anger stirred within me. Just because he could talk it off didn't mean I was done fighting for my dignity and my future, especially my son. The drive home from the community center was tough. Thick silence filled the car, mingling with the confusion in my son's eyes, which only added to the tension. Seeing my expression, Kevin quietly asked, "Mom, are you all right?" "I'm all right, honey," I assured him, tightening my grip on the steering wheel. "Just caught off guard, that's all." Kevin clenched his jaw. "Mom, I can't believe he showed up there with some woman and had the nerve to talk to you like that." "I know, sweetheart," I replied, feeling Kevin's anger mirroring my own. "But we can't let him get to us." "What are you going to do now?" Kevin asked, his eyes filled with hope as he watched my discomfort. "I'm not entirely sure yet," I admitted. "But I'm not finished. That prenup left me with nothing, but there's one thing I can do." Kevin understood what I meant. "Does that mean you're going to take him to court again?" he asked, his voice filled with determination. I nodded, meeting his gaze. "Yes, that's what we're going to do now." There was a moment of silence as Kevin processed my decision. "Mom, I'm with you no matter what you decide," he said gently, rubbing my arm. His words made me smile, swelling my heart with pride and love for my son. "Thank you for always being there for me, Kevin," I said with a slight smile. With his support, I felt more determined than ever. "Let's head home first, then we'll figure out what to do about that prenup." After reaching home, I freshened up and headed to the study. I laid out all the documents related to my divorce, feeling the frustration and resentment bubbling up inside me once again. Charles had always been a master manipulator, using his power to tip the scales in his favor. That prenuptial agreement had been the source of my distress all along, leaving me with absolutely nothing. Years of marriage and a whole load of memories. There should be something we could find. Charles is not that clever, I muttered, going through the pile of papers. Kevin looked around at the scattered documents, picking up one and handing it over to me. What is this about? It was a paragraph of dense legal jargon. I squinted my eyes, reading through all the fine print. You know, Kevin, this could be something. It feels a little vague. I looked at Kevin with hope. Call Jessica for me. We need to take another look at this prenup, Kevin exclaimed swiftly, dialing her number. Now let's show Charles that he shouldn't mess with us, he declared with determination as the call connected. I leaned back, feeling a surge of determination. Charles might have thought he had bested me, but we were just getting started. This was my chance to rectify the past and reclaim my life. The following days were a whirlwind of activity as Kevin, Jessica, my lawyer, and I delved into Charles's prenuptial agreement. It was a painstaking process of sifting through financial records and legal documents, but I was resolute in my determination to see it through. Jessica's expertise was invaluable as she helped unravel the complexities piece by piece. It's all coming together now, Jessica remarked, her expression focused. Charles employed cunning tactics to shield his assets during the divorce. Charles's deceitful maneuvers frustrated me. I clenched my jaw tightly with anger. Mom, don't worry, we'll get our revenge, Kevin reassured me, his grip on my hand unwavering. We have all the evidence we need to challenge the validity of that prenup. Now we just need to present our case to the judge, Jessica affirmed. Despite the looming stress, I've steeled myself for the battle ahead. All right, let's show him that he can't get away with everything he's done, I said, a glimmer of hope flickering within me as we arrived at the courthouse. Charles's presence was undeniable. His smirk and his high-powered team of attorneys exuded confidence, but I refused to be intimidated. Who knew my ex-wife was a financial genius? I must say I'm impressed you were able to uncover all this evidence, Charles taunted, his sarcasm obvious. Ignoring his words, I focused on Jessica's words. We both know the truth, Mr. Charles, she asserted, her gaze unwavering. I advise you to take this matter seriously because the evidence we've uncovered is more than enough to challenge your invalid prenuptial agreement. Charles chuckled arrogantly. You think you can outmaneuver my legal team? You're just a nobody. This is child's play and you'll see when I emerge victorious, he sneered. Kevin had heard enough. You can't underestimate us this time. We won't let you win, he declared firmly. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Charles's face, but it was quickly replaced by a menacing smirk. I'll make sure you and your mother lose everything, just wait and see, he spat venomously. Though his words sent a shiver down my spine, I drew strength from Jessica's reassuring pat and focused on the battle ahead, determined to see justice served. Don't worry, Jen. We got it this time. He won't be able to walk away by lying this time. Repeating Jessica's words in my mind again, I moved on with deep anticipation. We watched as Jessica and her team presented our shreds of evidence to the courtroom, unraveling the complexities piece by piece. Charles's well-planned game was breaking apart. The financial empire he had built was starting to lose its foundation as evidence was stacking on top of each other firmly. Some of his associates came forward, defending his misdeeds and evil tactics. Charles viciously unraveled his team in a persistent effort to disprove our witnesses and make our evidence appear false. With passing days, it was becoming more and more clear that his measures were crumbling down, and it went crystal clear at one moment when David, a former accountant, spread out his testimony incriminating Charles. He revealed a complex web of offshore accounts and portrayed the companies that Charles used to hide his assets during our divorce. Mr. Charles would regularly instruct me to falsify financial records and divert funds to untraceable accounts, David stated, his voice unwavering. It was all part of an elaborate scheme to avoid paying a single dime in alimony or child support. The courtroom erupted in murmurs of shock and disbelief. I felt a surge of comfort wash over me. Charles's face flushed a deep shade of red, his knuckles white as he gripped the table's edge in front of him. Objection, Your Honor! One of Charles's lawyers shouted, springing to his feet. This witness is biased, and his testimony amounts to hearsay. However, the judge remained steadfast. Overruled. The witness's testimony is relevant and admissible, she declared, fixing a stern gaze on Charles. Mr. Charles, you would do well to refrain from any further outbursts. Charles's jaw clenched, his eyes simmering with rage, yet he remained silent, his shoulders rigid as he sank back into his chair. As the proceedings continued, the tide turned against him. Media coverage intensified, with reporters delving into his past, uncovering a trail of uncertain business dealings and unethical practices. Suddenly, the once untouchable Charles found himself thrust into the spotlight of public outrage. His business empire began to crumble as investors and partners scrambled to distance themselves from the growing scandal. "This is a disaster," Charles growled, pacing the courthouse hallway. "How could this be happening?" I couldn't help but feel a small twinge of satisfaction as I watched him unravel. "Maybe if you hadn't spent so much time deceiving everyone, this wouldn't be happening," I replied, my voice tinged with smugness. Charles's eyes narrowed and he stepped closer, jabbing a finger in the air. "This isn't over, Jennifer. I'm going to make you and your pathetic team pay for this. I'll make sure you lose everything." I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated. "Go ahead and try, Charles, but this time the truth is on our side." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him to stew in his turmoil as I reunited with Kevin and Jessica. A sense of renewed hope washed over me. The tides were shifting, and the path to justice was becoming clearer with each passing day of the trial. The pressure around Charles's neck tightened. The evidence we unearthed, thanks to Jessica's relentless efforts, painted a damning picture of his deceitful and manipulative behavior. A pivotal moment arrived when we uncovered a complex scheme Charles had concocted to conceal assets during our divorce. Jessica and her team meticulously combed through financial records, tracing a labyrinth of offshore accounts and shell companies. "This is it, Jen," Jessica declared, her eyes sparkling with triumph. "We've got him dead to rights. The court will have no choice but to invalidate that prenup." I felt a surge of relief and anticipation, though a tinge of apprehension lingered. "Are you sure, Jessica? Charles has always found a way to wriggle out of these situations." Jessica nodded, her expression resolute. "Absolutely. The evidence is ironclad. Charles's little game of financial hide-and-seek is about to catch up with him." A sense of cautious optimism settled over me. After years of being on the defensive, the tables were finally turning. Charles's arrogance and overconfidence had led to his downfall, and I was more than ready to witness him face the consequences of his actions. As we returned to the courthouse for the next round of proceedings, the tension in the air was palpable. Charles and his team of lawyers seemed visibly on edge, their faces etched with a mixture of frustration and desperation. Jessica wasted no time in presenting our findings, her voice clear and confident as she laid out the details of Charles's elaborate scheme. The courtroom fell silent, save for the occasional gasp of shock and disbelief, as the magnitude of Charles's deception became increasingly clear. Charles attempted to maintain composure, but his usual swagger and bravado had been replaced by thinly veiled panic. When Jessica concluded her presentation, he rose to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "Objection, Your Honor," he shouted, his voice trembling. "This is all a fabrication, a blatant attempt to smear my reputation and take what is rightfully mine." Hey, pause for a moment. Would you care to support us? Like this video and subscribe for more. Now let's dive back into the story. The judge, however, remained unfazed. "Overruled, Mr. Wright. Miss Lee's presentation is factual and well substantiated. I would advise you to refrain from further outbursts." Charles's face flushed with fury, but he remained silent, his eyes narrowing as he glared at Jessica. As the presentation drew to a close, Jessica turned to face the judge, her expression solemn. "Your Honor, based on the overwhelming evidence we have presented, we are confident that the prenuptial agreement between Mr. Wright and Miss Reed is null and void. Mr. Wright's blatant deception and manipulation have rendered the agreement invalid, and we respectfully request that it be set aside." The courtroom erupted in a murmur of anticipation, and I felt Kevin's hands squeeze mine, his eyes shining with hope. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest as the judge considered Jessica's words. After what felt like an eternity, the judge cleared her throat, her gaze sweeping across the room. "Having carefully reviewed the evidence presented by Miss Lee, I find that the prenuptial agreement between Mr. Wright and Miss Reed is indeed invalid. Mr. Charles Wright's fraudulent actions and concealment of assets have rendered the agreement null and void." The courtroom exploded with cheers, and I felt a rush of relief and triumph wash over me. Kevin pulled me into a tight hug, his voice choked with emotion. "We did it, Mom," he exclaimed. "We finally beat him." I held my son close, tears of joy streaming down my face. "Yes, Kevin, we did. Justice has finally been served." Turning to face Charles, I saw the true depth of his defeat. His face was pale, his shoulders slumped in defeat. For once, the man who had always seemed untouchable was finally being held accountable for his actions. "This isn't over, Jennifer," he snarled, his voice trembling with rage. "I'll make you pay for this. Mark my words." I met his gaze unflinchingly. "No, Charles, this time it is over. Your reign of deceit and manipulation has come to an end." With that, I turned and walked away, knowing that I had finally reclaimed the power he had taken from me all those years ago. In the aftermath of the court's ruling, Charles's once formidable empire began to crumble at an alarming rate. The public scrutiny and legal repercussions of his fraudulent activities had a devastating impact on his business ventures and personal life. I watched with a mixture of satisfaction and pity as Charles's world came tumbling down around him. His fiancée, Barbara, was the first to abandon the ship, her eyes filled with betrayal. "How could you do this, Charles?" she cried, her voice laced with raw emotional pain. "All this time I thought you were this successful, upstanding businessman, but you're just a liar and a cheat." For once, Charles was rendered speechless, his usual bravado nowhere to be found. He stood there, his shoulders slumped, as Barbara gathered her belongings and stormed out of their shared apartment. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for the young woman, despite the animosity I harbored towards Charles. She had unwittingly become a pawn in his twisted game, and I knew all too well the sting of betrayal by someone you trusted most. However, any empathy I felt for Barbara was swiftly overshadowed by the sense of justice prevailing. Charles's once mighty business empire began to crumble under the weight of the revelations unearthed during court proceedings. Formerly, loyal investors and partners now scrambled to distance themselves from the tainted legacy he had built. Lawsuits and investigations mounted, leaving Charles facing the stark reality of financial ruin. "This is all your fault, Jennifer. If you had just left well enough alone, I could have continued living in peace," he shouted, cornering me outside the courthouse. I met his gaze unflinchingly. "This is the consequence of your greed, Charles. You brought this upon yourself." He let out a frustrated growl, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "I'll make you pay for this. Mark my words. I'll take everything from you, your business, your son, your pathetic excuse for a life." I couldn't help but feel a pang of fear at his words, but I refused to let it show. "Threatening me won't do you any good, Charles. The damage has been done, and you have no one to blame but yourself." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him to stew in his rage. Despair filled me as I reunited with Kevin and Jessica. However, a flicker of contentment arose within me. "Kevin, now Charles's reign of terror is finally going to end sooner or later," I mumbled. Kevin embraced me, the tension in his body easing away. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. Thanks for not giving up," he said softly, with relief in his voice. "Yes, my dear, and it's time we help those wronged by Charles," I replied. Jessica, silent until now, stepped forward with understanding shining in her eyes. "Indeed, Jen, we can make a huge change," she said as we discussed using my settlement to aid other victims. A sense of purpose washed over me. Charles's downfall had been a grueling journey, but justice had prevailed. Now we had the chance to ensure his legacy of greed and deceit would not be forgotten. And so, as the dust settled on Charles's downfall, standing at a crossroads, uncertainty clouded my path. The settlement from the invalidated prenup offered newfound financial freedom, yet the journey had left me drained. "Mom, this is our chance to start over. We can do anything we want now," he exclaimed, his enthusiasm contagious. I couldn't help but smile at his optimism. "You're right, Kevin, but I'm not quite sure where to begin," I admitted. Jessica, ever pragmatic, stepped in with a reassuring smile. "Well, Jen, I think the first step is to take a breath and consider what you truly want to do with this opportunity. It's about building a better future for you and Kevin." Her words struck a chord with me. "You're right. I want to make sure we do this the right way, without repeating Charles's mistakes." "Whatever you decide, Mom, I'm with you. We're in this together," he said, his support unwavering. Pride and gratitude swelled within me for my son. his steadfastness a constant source of strength. "Thank you, Kevin. I couldn't have done this without you." After much deliberation, Kevin and I agreed to use a portion of the settlement to expand my small business, finally giving it the resources it needed to thrive. Jessica assisted us in navigating the legal and financial aspects, ensuring wise and sustainable choices. However, the rest of the settlement was earmarked for a more altruistic purpose. Inspired by the resilience and determination I displayed in my battle against Charles, I decided to establish a foundation to support other single mothers in our community. "This is an incredible idea, Jen," Jessica said, her eyes shining with approval. "You've been through so much, and now you have the opportunity to help others in a similar position." I nodded, a sense of purpose filling me. Exactly, Charles's actions hurt so many people, and I want to ensure that his legacy doesn't continue to haunt others. This foundation is my way of reclaiming my story and using it to empower women like me. Kevin gave my arm a gentle squeeze, his smile warm and proud. "I think it's an amazing idea, Mom. You're going to change so many lives with this." As we worked tirelessly to bring the foundation to life, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace and fulfillment. It was as if the darkness that had once clouded my life was slowly but surely being replaced by a renewed sense of hope and purpose. Then one day, as I was finalizing the details of the Foundation's mission and programs, I received an unexpected call. It was Charles, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Jennifer," he began, his words laced with a hint of desperation. I need your help." I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. After all the pain and suffering he had caused, a part of me wanted to simply hang up the phone and never speak to him again. But something in his tone gave me pause. "What is it, Charles?" I asked, my voice cautious. "I've lost everything," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "My businesses, my investments, my reputation. It's all gone. I have nothing left." "I see," I replied with a twinge of pity. I considered my next words carefully. "What can I do about it, Charles?" He let out a defeated sigh. "I'm aware I don't deserve it, but would you spare some of your settlement to help the others that I have hurt in the past? I need to make amends, Jennifer. I need to make this right." I was taken aback by his request. The sincerity in his voice was something I had never witnessed before. For a moment, I was silent, weighing my options. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady. "Very well, Charles. I'll see what I can do." As I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Charles's fall from grace had been swift and unforgiving, but in the end, it seemed that even he had found the humility to seek redemption. With a renewed sense of purpose, I turned my attention back to the foundation, determined to ensure that my story would not be defined by Charles's betrayal, but by the triumph of resilience and compassion. Let's conclude the story shortly. The foundation thrived, a testament to Jennifer's strength and resilience. Charles, stripped of his ill-gotten gains, found himself humbled, working odd jobs to make ends meet. He never forgot the pain he had caused, and Jennifer, though still wary, saw a flicker of genuine remorse in his eyes. Kevin, now a young man, grew into a compassionate and successful entrepreneur, always mindful of the lessons learned from his mother's fight. As for Jennifer, she found joy in her work, her life a testament to the power of forgiveness and the enduring strength of a mother's love. The past, though painful, had shaped her into a woman who, despite the hardships, had found her way to happiness, a beacon of hope for others who had been wronged. After experiencing the full journey of our story, we'd love to hear your thoughts. How did the story resonate with you? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay blessed. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look, "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn, "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. "Meetings should be for employees only." Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, what's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. "Probably Sam." Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. "Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.